Hello and welcome to Newswire. I am Jawad Tehami. Despite signing of a peace deal in Afghanistan, tranquility in the country remains elusive. The Taliban have increased their attacks against the Afghan security forces, killing hundreds since 29th of February, the day when the US and the Taliban signed the Doha peace deal. Most recently, the Taliban claimed to have killed 150 Afghan security forces in a car bomb attack on a military center in Helmand province. Earlier, the US had issued a stern warning of a response in case of attacks and urged all the sides to restrain. The Taliban insist their 5,000 prisoners must be released as agreed in the Doha peace deal, but Afghan president seems to use the prisoners' release as a leverage point and not concede everything. And to understand the dynamics of the troubled Afghan peace process, we are joined today by Mohammad Hadees, journalist joining us from Kabul, and Professor Christian Kaunert, analyst and the director of International Center for Policing and Security at the University of the South Wales. Thank you for your time, both of you gentlemen. I will begin with you, Mr. Hadees. What do these increased attacks by the Taliban depict? Is the Doha peace deal near a breaking point, as the Taliban had warned earlier a couple of weeks ago?
Thank you very much for having me. In the recent 2 months, yes, as you mentioned, the Taliban increased their attacks on the Afghan military forces and all over Afghanistan. And the major attack was the attack in Helmand. So, yes, the increasing of the violence in Afghanistan pose an immediate threat to the fragile deal which was signed on February 2019 in Doha between Taliban and United States. But one point is very clear that both sides, they mentioned earlier, so the both sides agree on that through fight and war, they will not gain a political settlement. So they should and they must have a political settlement through negotiation, and the fighting and the war has not a positive result.
Okay, Professor Kaunert, I'll come to you. Are these attacks by the Taliban out of increased frustration in them, or is it a show of strength from the Taliban?
Yes, I would lean towards the latter. I think this is part of their negotiation strategy, that they want to show, look, we're here in a position of strength. We can determine what the negotiations are. And in a sense, they're trying to see how, they're in a sense testing the resolve of the United States government. Is the United States government really committed to the peace deal, which could mean that they need to stay much longer in the country than they actually anticipated? Or are they trying to withdraw and they're using the peace deal as a pretext, in a sense, to facilitate that withdrawal, in which case they're going to get a very clear understanding of that by increasing the violence in terms of how strongly is the United States and how strongly is the Afghan government going to react to this. If they react strongly, then maybe their hand is not as strong as they think.
So you talk of the response by the Afghan security forces and the US. As the number and the intensity and the frequency of these attacks by the Taliban is increasing, don't you see a strong reaction and retaliation by the Afghan security forces and the US is very much inevitable?
If they're committed towards eventually achieving a peace deal, in a sense, it is inevitable. They're going to have to. But I think the game that the Taliban are playing is to kind of test that very commitment by the US government. Is the US government really that committed to achieving that? And in that case, are they going to stay longer than anticipated? If yes, then I think the Taliban are going to back off in a little while, a little bit, in order to facilitate that transition, if you like. If the US government and the Afghan government doesn't show off strength, in a sense, then presumably the Taliban will feel emboldened by this.
Okay, these, as Mr. Professor Kaunert just alluded to, that this particular increased attacks by the Taliban is out of sheer strength by the Taliban rather than their increased frustration. What do you think? Is it increased frustration because the prisoner swap is very slow and very painful for the Taliban, and they insist on releasing their 15 rather, the most desired prisoners to be released at the earliest?
Yes, I agree with the professor. The recent attack by the Taliban create the frustration, and more specifically among the ordinary Afghans. So the Afghan people, they're losing their life every day, and so the Afghan people, they're asking for an immediate reduction in violence. And also regarding to releasing of the prisoner in the recent 3 days, more than 300 Taliban released from the Afghan government, which was welcomed by the Taliban, and the Taliban in a statement welcomed this, but they're asking for accelerating this process. And also they committed to release the Afghan military forces. That's a very positive sign. And the Afghan government also hope to the Taliban come to, as soon as possible, they come to the negotiation table and they engage in an intra-Afghan dialogue. And that's a very good sign that both sides accelerate the releasing of the prisoner, and it will eventually pave the way for the intra-Afghan dialogue, which was the hope of the Afghan people and as well as the international community.
Mr. Hadees, you said that it is a sign that the prisoners are being released by the both sides, but it is very slow and painful sort of a process, because according to the Doha peace deal, 5,000 Taliban prisoners should have been released by 10th of March, and 1,000 Afghan prisoners should have been released by the Taliban. But we see these numbers happening as of today only in some hundreds.
Yeah, you are right. Unfortunately, I can say that the political crisis in the Afghanistan also a kind of a threat for as you witnessed. So we passed the election and dispute on the election, and also the President Ghani was declared the winner, but his rival Dr. Abdullah was trying to challenge this. So I can conclude that, yeah, in Afghanistan, these all things require an inclusive government, and that also was a problem. But it looks like both and the Afghan elites are understanding if they are losing the chance, so that they will not. That's a good thing, and they should accelerate the whole process, and that's a big chance for them. And also, I want to mention that the United States also is trying to they're very much clear about the succeeding of this U.S. Taliban deal, and in the recent they are threatening to cutting $1 billion. So that's also a kind of warning for them. But all over, so we are hopeful that both sides understand the importance of the...
Mr. Hadees, I'll come to this point, how important is for the U.S. and the speedy process of the withdrawal of their troops from Afghanistan. Later on in the show, Professor Kaunert, when we talk about the slow and the painful release of the prisoners, which hasn't happened as of yet as per the Doha peace deal, and there are certain reports in sections of media that the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, wants to release initially only 1,500 prisoners, which is in a stark contradiction to the number that is mentioned in the Doha peace deal. Do you think this is a psychological warfare which has been unleashed to frustrate the Taliban?
I think, in a sense, the fundamental reason why things are going so slowly is because we have to remember who had an agreement with whom. The agreement is between the United States government and the Taliban. The Taliban did not want to have an agreement as such with the Afghani government because they don't consider them a true and legitimate government. But what it means is the Afghani government is actually outside of the peace deal. A lot of the obligations of the peace deal, they are on the Afghani government, like you say, the exchange of prisoners. But they're not a party to the agreement. They didn't agree to it in the first place. So in a sense, it is positively surprising that there is some movement within the Afghani government at all. And I think this was always going to be a difficult, very, very difficult process, because the one thing that is very important for the Afghani government is, in a sense, a guarantee that it will still be there after the peace deal is implemented, that it will still be able to continue to exist and have the security guarantees that it needs. Because, of course, the withdrawal of the U.S. forces provides for an environment where the Afghani government is under threat. So in a sense, it's always going to be a difficult release. It's always going to be a difficult process.
So, Professor Kaunert, when we talk about the main irritant, every time we talk about the Afghan peace process, the unwillingness of the Afghan government comes to the fore every time, and they come up with the narrative, since they were not part or the signatory of the Doha peace deal. Hence, it's not incumbent upon the Afghan government to abide by the things which are mentioned in the deal. But a couple of days before, the spokesperson for the Afghan National Security Council, Jawad Tehami, said that more prisoners are being released on the orders of President Ashraf Ghani to comply with the Doha peace deal. So isn't it a contradiction?
Of a contradiction, but in a sense, in order to achieve a peace agreement, you always have to, in a sense, move towards resolving those kind of contradictions that created the conflict in the first place. So I think here we have the situation where the Afghani government belatedly is trying to insert itself into the peace deal and is trying to become an active player in the peace deal. And by fulfilling some of the obligations, they are, in a sense, saying we want that peace deal to succeed, but at the same time, by not fulfilling everything to the letter of the agreement, they're also saying, well, look, we haven't been a party, but we want to be a party. We want to also say what is happening. And I think that's what the Afghani government is doing. In a sense, they're saying clearly, we want to be a party, but we want to be a full party to this.
Okay, Mr. Hadees, what does peace in Afghanistan mean for the U.S. in terms of the troop withdrawal and keeping a security balance for a permanent political solution in Afghanistan?
And among Afghans, so the ordinary Afghan people, they are thinking that, especially when in the recent 2 months increasing of the violence, the Afghan people, they are thinking that the United States is in a kind of rush and they badly need a deal, and so they will eventually have a deal, and they will not much care about the consensus or about the results. But yes, the Afghan government, as the professor mentioned, so the slowness in the process. So the Afghan government was not in the initial phase, was a part of the deal, but now the good signs are coming. So the Afghan government releasing the prisoners, and also the Taliban are welcoming, and they're also releasing the Afghan military forces from their prisoners, and also a kind of their negotiation to make a inclusive government. These all things come together, and so the people are eventually hope to have a kind of inclusive government to tackle the problems, and also to succeed the U.S. Taliban deals, and also we will have eventually enduring peace and ending the war in Afghanistan.
Okay, Professor Kaunert, some media reports suggest that the troop withdrawal in Afghanistan of the U.S. forces is a little ahead of time. Do you think the upcoming presidential election in the U.S. will actually help expedite this drawdown, whether the intra-Afghan talks are commenced or not?
Yes, I think it's very clear that the presidential elections have a deep, deep impact on the U.S. withdrawal. I think President Trump has made it very clear he wants to bring troops home. That was his election slogan in the 2016 elections, in fact. So in a sense, he wants to go into these elections saying, look, I've achieved something. I'm the one who brought peace. So for him, this is important. So this is, in a sense, determining the timetable to an extent. But at the same time, it's also the weakness in it, because it means by absolutely wanting to go to the American people to say, I've achieved this, it puts him in a slightly weaker position, because, of course, the Taliban can try to exploit this. So in that sense, it can have the impact on both sides, if you like.
So, but what the U.S. leaves without any inclusive government in Afghanistan in place, and the Taliban continue to increase the attacks, won't it leave Afghanistan at the mercy of a perpetual insurgency?
That is clearly the risk. I think President Trump probably doesn't want that type of deal. So he wants to have some sort of deal that looks like it is an inclusive government. So whatever the outcome is going to look a little bit that way. But the danger is, as you rightly pointed out, if this hasn't been achieved, then in a sense, this will be a permanent undermining, and it could potentially lead the way that, especially if President Trump loses the next election and we have a new president, Joe Biden, that president could be forced, in a sense, to increase American help to the Afghani government. And we may see a return of American forces if this is not handled in the right way.
Okay, Mr. Hadees, I'll come with this similar question, that would the U.S. Withdraw completely from Afghanistan, leaving a vacuum behind if no inclusive government is formed and no permanent political solution is found in the war-torn country, and the Taliban keep on increasing their attacks?
Yeah, this is a big question, and that's also a big concern for the Afghan people as well. If the United States leave without an inclusive government, and so the insurgency has increased and we will not have an inclusive government, so how the situation would be. So it's kind of a concerning point. But as mentioned earlier, the United States is trying to not have such kind of deal with the Taliban. I mean, they will trying to have an inclusive government in Afghanistan. So that's why they are threatening to cutting their assistance to Afghan government, and they are kind of using different approach to convince the Afghan elites to come together, because they are saying that if there would be not an inclusive government, how you gonna approach the whole challenges. So that's also a big question and a big concerning point. But the more relying on the United States, that how they want to come out and how they want to solve this all problems which is currently. And so at the last and conclude, I can say that a lot of factors that can disrupt the peace process, but the main player is the United States, that how they want to deal with the Taliban, or how they want to be in Afghanistan.
Okay, Professor Kaunert, one last question. Will Afghanistan be able to see peace ever in near future, or how the Doha peace deal can be saved? Are there any certain ways that this peace deal can be saved?
Well, obviously, I hope that there will be. I mean, Afghani history is not a very positive predictor of whether this is going to succeed. But of course, in terms of being able to succeed, I think what is necessary is really a coming together between the US government and the Afghani government, that the US government provides them with enough of a security guarantee that even after the withdrawal of US forces, they're going to make sure that, in a sense, there's a survival of the government, there's a survival of the democratic structure. That, in their view, needs to happen by an all-inclusive government, and I think they're going to strive towards that. But without an essential security guarantee for the Afghani government and for the Afghani elites and institutions, I think it's very difficult to achieve that. So I'm hoping this will be possible, and I'm hoping that President Trump's strategy goes in this direction, and so far it looks like it might. So in that sense, we have to be optimistic, because in a sense we are moving forward despite all the obstacles that we've already mentioned.
Okay, Professor Christian, analyst and the director of the International Centre for Policing and Security at the University of South Wales, joined us from London. Thank you very much for your time at Newswire. And Mr. Mohammad Hadees, journalist, joining us from Kabul. Thank you for your time at Newswire as well. With this, we come to the end of the first segment of the show. In the second, we'll discuss the plight of the migrant workers in India as a result of the sudden lockdown in the country. We'll be back in a bit. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Newswire. I'm Jawad Tehami. The sudden and unplanned lockdown in India to curb the spread of the coronavirus has created a human tragedy on a massive scale. This lockdown proved a thunderbolt for thousands of migrant workers and daily wages as they lost their means of earning overnight. With nothing left in their hand, they started moving back to their native areas, resulting in one of the biggest exoduses in contemporary history. Since the public transport came to a standstill, many of them started their journey home by foot. Many died on the way due to heat, hunger, and exhaustion. Later, they were asked by the railway authorities to pay their fares, which earned criticism from the opposition Congress party as well. Not only this, these migrant workers stranded in different states were beaten and baton charged by the police as well. And to talk more about this, we are joined by Mr. Ravi Srivastav, analyst joining us from Mumbai, and Mr. Nishant Verma, analyst joining us from Delhi. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen, being part of the Newswire today. I will begin with you, Mr. Srivastav. Please share with us about the scale of this human tragedy as a result of the sudden lockdown in India that is unfolding due to the BJP-led government policies.
Mr. Tehami, let me tell you, first of all, Government of India as of now is behaving just like a headless chicken. They do not know what actually they want to do and what actually should be done. The left hand does not know what right hand is doing. The government talks something else, the railway talks something else, the state government wants something else, and the poor man on the road, on the street, he wants at least to reach his home, which also he is not allowed for. The issue is, the situation is, what you saw a day before yesterday in Surat was more than third time. It was third time that the migrants got restless, and these are the people who are working more than 2,000 kilometers away from their homes, and they are not getting any wages, they are not getting any food, they are not getting any support from the government, and they are just on the street. Their only desire is that somehow they reach to their village or a town or somewhere where they belong to, so that they can find some kind of a shelter over there. Because here where they work, their landlords are evicting them, the food is not available, the meals are not there, the children are suffering for milk, they are in a miserable condition. And this government, before implementing, I'm not doubting the intentions behind the lockdown. The lockdown was good, but there was absolutely no preparedness. Even after implementing the lockdown, there was ample of opportunity that the government would have coordinated well with the state governments and the people would have swung into action. But the fact is, nothing happened. You are only seeing last 2 or 3 days, some trains have been planned on which people are going. Here also, again, a misery has struck the people. They do not know. They have to pay some 1,000 rupees, some 1,500 rupees fare. The bus fares they have to pay. Just like cattle, you see your buses, just like cattle, they are being transported from one place to another.
Mr. Srivastav, I'll come to this very point that you've just mentioned, that after easing certain restrictions regarding the lockdown in India, the authorities have prepared certain trains for making these people go back to their homes, but they're being asked to pay the fares. And the Congress has criticized this particular move by the authorities. Mr. Verma, as Mr. Srivastav has already mentioned, the situation over there of the migrant workers stranded in different states, looking forward to head back to their native areas, is very dire. What do you say about it?
Thank you for having me on the program. Primarily, we must understand that, yes, the National Disaster Management Act, NDMA as we call it, has been brought into force right in the beginning of Mr. Modi's Management Act has been managed quite disastrously. The issue does not start there, actually. The problem started that the late response to the WHO guidelines and emergency protocol, which was laid down in January, understood correctly by the Government of India. And hence, in the mid of March, a sort of panic was created by the government, which was not needed. Having said that, yes, the panic did impact on the livelihood of more or less the entire country, but then the unplanned behavior, which led to other, not I should say human disaster or tragedy, but administrative tragedy in the country, has put people into a corner. Now, currently, when we still know that hundreds and thousands of people are moving towards their homes, now who are these people? Majority of them are migrant laborers and workers. Now, migrant laborers and workers today, if they are moving back to home, while there is relaxation being provided in the lockdown procedures, is a disaster by itself. Because this is the time that these laborers and migrant workers should actually be going back to their work sites and not home. This may lead to a big economic crash, which I foresee, and I fail to understand why government of India is still behaving like an ostrich.
Yeah, that is exactly an interesting point. The authorities are of the view that the lockdown might be ended by 17th of May. By this time, that the point that you have just mentioned, the people are actually heading back to their native areas. And what if the lockdown ends on 17th of May? Would those all migrant workers again move towards other different states in order to find new work?
If I may add to that, it is not the first time that there is a relaxation provided by the government of India in terms of lockdown. The first ever relaxation in this lockdown duration was provided on 15th of April. However, no businesses opened in the manner they were supposed to. Later, it was amended on 25th of April 2020, and furtherance was given in terms of relaxation if we read the orders of Ministry of Home Affairs. However, nobody paid heed to it because it was a panic-stricken lockdown right in the beginning, which has caused a fear psychosis in a layman's mind. Hence, they never opened up and they did not start working. Thirdly, most importantly, at this point in time, when we foresee the lockdown being further quashed or relaxed on 17th of May, I doubt if it is going to be a relaxation. Reason being, India, unfortunately, has observed a multiple-fold rise in the number of patients as per the government of India numbers. Now, a fool will only relax it further when the numbers of patients are going high and, you bring it down to a level that it can be considered as open. So that is not going to happen. Yes, what is going to happen is that economic crash will bring India to knees, and that is only because of the poor and mindless governance. I'm sorry to state so, but poor and mindless governance, because things should have been taken care right in the beginning. And I must add that I am pro this lockdown. However, it was too late to be implemented, and I foresee it being relaxed and taken away too early than it should be. There should have been a methodological procedure.
Right. Mr. Srivastav, I'll come to you with this very point. If the lockdown in India is ended by 17th of May, what about these migrant workers especially? Should they keep heading back to their homes, or should they stay at the very place they are right now and wait for 17th of May so that they can start looking for new work as well?
Very right, Tehami, you have rightly heard. My friend Nishant has put it in a wonderful words actually. The fact is, there is a considerable amount of distrust among the people. See, the first lockdown was introduced for some 21 days, starting from 24th of March, ending on 14th of April. Another 18 days were added to it, and then it was extended till the 3rd of May. And now it is extended by another 2 weeks. The fact is, the migrant labor, they do not know how far it will continue. There are rumors floating around that this may go even up to 30th June or even may beyond that. So the people, those who are not well-read, those who are the workers, those are the people on the ground, they do not trust the government. They don't know that whether what the government is saying will stick by it or not. And the fact what is happening is, now government told the industrialists, you open up your factories, you open up your industries, but they say there are no workers because the people have vanished. People have gone away. The fields, the crop is there. The crop is to be cut, but there are no laborers available for cutting that. So that's a problem that the government is unable to manage the situation. The fact would have been the people, migrant labor, they would have been taken care of by respective chief ministers with the support from the central government by providing them all kind of food, shelter, everything, and convince them that please don't leave the place. I recall one chief minister in Delhi who really went ahead and appealed to the people, please don't go to your places. We will make sure that you are well fed, your families are taken care of, and we provide you the employment as early as possible. But now, nobody has done anything. And as a result, you are seeing there are clusters. There are 7-8 cities in India, the Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, Kolkata, Hyderabad, some cities are there where most of the industries are in the form of a cluster. And those laborers, they stay in the nearby slum from those industries. And they are vanishing from there. They are running away, leaving those places, and they are not available anymore. So this will be a catastrophe.
So, Mr. Srivastav, as you said, people over there in India don't trust the authorities, and they don't know exactly how long this particular lockdown will last. And you're of the view that it might last or might be extended till the end of June. So all the migrant workers are supposed to go back to their homes. But obviously, they are in other states to have the better opportunities for earning. But if they stay at their native areas with no better opportunities of earning till the end of June, don't we see an economic and a social as well as political catastrophe that will unfold by the end of June over there in India?
Tehami, this was my last word. It's going to be a catastrophic situation as far as the economy in India is concerned, because those people who have left their places, it will be a Herculean task to bring them back to their work. Although this is also a fact that migrant labor, they do not have any much support in the places where they go. Even as it is, wherever they are going, whether in the state of Bihar or Jharkhand or UP or Odisha, they are put in a quarantine there for 2 weeks at least. 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they'll be put under quarantine. So as it is, they are not going to get any place of their own. They'll be again in a quarantine, they'll be sitting out there, and they will not be finding any kind of an employment over there. But this will create a serious imbalance in India's situation of the labor market, the supply for the labor market, because people will not be available to work. And this will create a serious imbalance, and some industries, especially I would say the small industries, MSMEs, they will find it most difficult to run their establishments to meet the requirement of the labor in their cities. That's going to be a troublesome situation. Yeah.
Okay, there is a huge balance, Mr. Srivastav, you think is going to be created because the number of people, the migrant workers who have headed back to their homes because of this lockdown. Mr. Verma, there are certain videos circulating on media of the maltreatment of these migrant workers while they were looking forward to go back to their homes by the police. Isn't it an open insult to an already accrued injury?
Well, first of all, let's understand who a migrant laborer or a worker is. A person who did not get a job opportunity back home in his village or a small place moves to larger cities in order to get work. So they are not the domicile and natives of these large cities or large cluster areas of industry. Now, when as a panic-stricken laborer, gang of laborers, group of people, they need to sustain their livelihood or sustain their lives per se, then they will definitely want to go back. However, the lockdown in the strictest manner has been that people shall not move out. But today, what we witness, when you say correctly about certain videos, not all, because not all are authentic, however, certain videos do portray the correct form that yes, there was a friction between the police to contain them, and the reason was only one, that on the road, when you come, you will not gain or yield anything. It has to be a proper method in order to go back home, for which the government of India has started functioning on it. But then the desire of returning home, even if in a cashless manner, knowing that you may not be able to sustain later while after reaching the village. But then that is the only reason that these hundreds and thousands of people in various parts of the country did come out on the road and still are out on the road in certain areas. They are definitely bound to have friction with the police. So it is not something unnatural, and I would not speculate it against the administration on this.
Okay, Mr. Srivastav, what do you think? What things do you suggest to the Indian government if at this point in time it can take some measures to control already worsening situation over there?
Just first of all, arrest the trend of this migration, which is totally undesirable. If you really want to keep your economy in shape, you need people, you need the labor, you need the skilled people who can work over there. This is not applicable to organized sector much, but definitely the unorganized sector is going to be affected most. The government, through their cooperative federalism with the state chief ministers should reassure their people, arrange for something, food or allowance or something of the sort, so that they can give it to these people and assure them that earliest possible they are the industries where they were working or where they were getting some kind of employment. They will be on a roll and they will be able to earn their livelihood as fast as possible. If need be, a kind of a universal basic income, the concept given by the Congress party sometimes before, at least that amount should be provided to them. The government comes out with so many things, but what they are giving is the alms only, the 500 rupees, some 2,000 rupees or something like that. How much a man can survive in such a small money? So they should be given a sufficient amount so that they can run their families at least for next 15 days or a month or so that they can look after their families.
So that they can look after their family. Analyst joining us from Mumbai, thank you for your time at Newswire. And Mr. Nishant Verma, analyst joining us from Delhi, thank you for your time at Newswire as well. Now we are joined by Major General retired Ijaz Awan, analyst joining us from Islamabad. Thank you for your time at Newswire as well. On one side, we see the BJP-led government in India has completely lost the trust among the common people over there due to its undemocratic policies. And on the other hand, its belligerence on the line of control continues unabated. Now, closer to 900 ceasefire violations have been committed by Indian forces at the line of control and the working boundary during this year alone. How do you see this attitude of India, particularly when it is failing badly domestically in order to control the situation and it is still continuing with the LOC violations?
Well, I think there are no two opinions on this thing, that India is treating the minorities, all minorities other than the Hindu majority, very irrationally, and there are grave violations of human rights. And this has now been very amply highlighted by the US Commission. Notwithstanding that, what they are doing in Kashmir, that is a case where they have tried to change the status of the Kashmir. That we all know, Indian occupied Kashmir, people are under lockdown for the last about now 8 months, over the 60,000-70,000 killings and rapes, and that's a story that's known to the entire world. But now this ceasefire violations, these are by design. These are not by mistake. This is not just a coincidence, and I do not think it is being done by the trigger-happy people deployed on the line of control. It is by design, because once the winters are over, it's a campaigning season in Kashmir. And I think under this garb, India is trying to do the forward build-up. They are doing dumping of their ammunition. They are redeploying their guns. They are reinforcing the positions on the border, under the garb that there is some crossing taking place from Pakistan. I think it has been very clearly highlighted by the DGISPR the other day that they have a fencing all along the line of control. It's a fence which is patrolled and monitored by the human resource. Then there are night vision sites and cameras installed along that fencing. With that, they have satellite placing to check the crossings, and they also have quadricopters with the field formations which keep surveilling the area. So there is no question of crossing from Pakistan into Kashmir, in Indian-occupied Kashmir. And should they have any evidence by now, they would have produced it in front of the world or in front of the other organization. There is yet another offer being made by the Pakistan Army that there is a very robust mechanism of United Nations Military Observer Group, India and Pakistan, which is for the last 50 years it is deployed. Pakistan is willing to take them to any area. They will be given access to any area that India wishes to know the details.
So General Awan, this particular thing has already been kept by the Pakistan forces. The military observer group representatives have been taken along from the Pakistani side of the LOC, and they observed that it was not on the part of Pakistan that the ceasefire violations were happening. But why do you think India is not willing to do this?
India since long has denied these military observer groups access to the line of control because they know what they are doing, and they will be exposed very badly if they let the military observers go there and observe who is doing what. So that's why they have never allowed them beyond Srinagar. They do not give them this access. And unfortunately, the United Nations is also looking the other way, and they were never forced themselves to deploy this military observer group on the border, on the line of control, where both the countries have a legal binding and understanding with the United Nations. But now I think there is some understanding between USA, Israel, and India. That's why they are doing all this. And I will not be surprised if India ventures into another
so, General Awan, very quickly, since we are short of time, what are the options at the hands of Pakistan? What should Pakistan do when you already mentioned there is a nexus of the US, Israel, and India?
In understanding, as I understand, in my opinion, there is going to be no pressure on India other than the condemnation of their acts, what they are doing. So a bit of diplomatic pressure, which India will disregard, and they have already disregarded the UN resolution. Now, the only way forward is that Pakistan, along with the diplomatic maneuver, which must go on, and it continues to go on for the last 70 years, must start supporting the people of Kashmir, give them hope that you have not been abandoned, you will not be left at the mercy of the Indian. We are a third party into this conflict, and we will demand resolution according to the UN resolution. And people of Kashmir must be helped physically, materially by the people of Azad Kashmir, who are their brethren, and according to the UN provisions of self-defense, because Indian occupied Kashmir is now having a status of occupied territory, and people have the legal position to resist with arms. So armed struggle, their armed resistance is legal. We must provide them any support that we can. And alongside, we must give them hope that you will not be abandoned and not left at the mercy of the people of India.
Thank you very much for your time. Major General Ijaz Awan is joining us from Islamabad. With this, we come to the end of today's Newswire with more in-depth analyses. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Till then, take good care.